What are some of the biggest mistakes that you get in when you receive files? What pisses you off? What do you get that you go, oh God?
What really pisses me off, or it's not that it pisses me off, it's just that you can't really do anything with it, is if somebody has already effectively hammered the output of their recording when they've mixed down the stereo file, basically. So a lot of guys that perhaps are a little bit more inexperienced than, you know, the top engineers, are mixing their track, and they're perhaps comparing it to tracks while they're mixing it, and they're thinking, oh God, my track's not as loud, so they whack on a limiter on the output bus, or they whack on a compressor, and they are really just doing it so that it's screamingly loud when they're listening to it. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, well, actually just turn up your amp or drop the level of a track you're comparing it to, so you don't have to do that. And then the problem is when they leave those the processors on the output bus. So you then get a waveform that's already been hammered, you put it on Sadie, and then you're like, oh yeah, look, it's a brick wall already. And that's when it's just impossible for us to do anything with it, really. You just have to say, well, you've effectively mastered it. Makes it very difficult, because the signal's already clipped or it's distorted. You can't undo that, obviously. There's nothing that will undo it. So you just have to say, either go away and do me one with less volume, less processing on it. Yeah.
So leave a bit of headroom.
Leave a bit of headroom. I mean, I do say if you've got bus compression that's integral to your mix, a lot of the time it's gelling the mix together. You know, you take it off and it's like, it's all a bit messy, and which is great. Leave it on there if it gels the mix, but don't have the output of it, you know, too high. Don't hammer it. Limiting's the main one. You know, like I said, a lot of guys will have a limiter on the output bus. Don't hammer the limiter. You know, tickle it, whatever, just so that it's not going above 0 in the digital domain. But back off, basically, if you can.
And as far as preparing files for mastering, besides leaving a bit of headroom, is there anything else you need to be aware of? Like, as far as, do you get people, I don't know, exporting it to lower quality, coming in with an MP3, or...
You do occasionally get people coming in with MP3s, yeah, and I tend to turn them away, basically.
And why is that a problem?
Well, because, I mean...
So I'm being difficult.
Yeah, I know. No, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, MP3 is just a dreadful format, basically, isn't it? I mean, you are stripping out shed loads of frequencies in the conversion process that the MP3 converters think, oh, okay, I can get away with removing these frequencies. I can get away with removing everything above, say, 14K. Depends on the resolution of your MP3, obviously. So... It just, there's no point mastering, there's no point putting it through all this beautiful gear. I mean, I understand a lot, sometimes we do get artists that have, say, mixed down a track and all they've got is an MP3 of it, the hard drive's gone down, or for whatever reason they can't create a new mix. And in that respect, obviously I will master an MP3 for them, but it's just, you're just missing so much information that it's almost not worth it, really.
Now, on a bit of a tangent, you were talking earlier about how you started out playing with synthesizers and DJing and stuff like that. I've run into a few different engineers who believe that you have a creative person or a technical person, and that an engineer really can't be a successful creative musician, and a musician can't really, except for the very chosen few. I don't agree with that.
I totally don't agree with that. Look at all the amazing producers out there that have been effectively writing and producing their music now for a long, long time, you know, since the technology became affordable and available, you know, in the mid-80s, when running an old Atari and a sampler, and they had to learn to mix, they had to learn to balance, to produce. I think they go very much hand in hand. I think there's a lot of very good musicians and producers that are very, very good engineers as well. Yeah, that's a very important thing about mastering, is I think that you never finish learning. You know, you think you know everything, and then you'll work on a project or a type of music that you've maybe not worked on so much before, and you learn new things about EQing and techniques, and you're always honing your technique. It's not to say that what you did 5 years ago isn't any good. I think you just learn new ways of putting stuff together. You perhaps play around with your signal path a bit more, so where you've got your compressors in your chain and where you've got your EQs in the chain does make a big difference to the final outcome. What are the most important things in mastering? And you know, my issue these days is you know, going back to your point earlier, is perhaps more with the guys that are sitting in some I mean, this is going to sound bad, and if you broadcast this, I'm probably going to seem like, you know, an anal old fart, but I think the most important thing in mastering, firstly, is your ears, secondly is the speakers, and thirdly is the acoustics of your room. And if they're not spot on, then effectively the final master isn't going to be spot on. And I've a real issue these days with a lot, you know, I know, let's buy some Waves plugins and sit there in a back room with a couple of speakers, and that I'm a mastering engineer, am I? And that's, I think Nick and I, our big bugbear at the moment is that sort of.
Do you have to deal with that, saying, well, why do you cost so much? My mate Leroy
we'll do it for £10 a track. Well, it's like that. Exactly. It's like that classic internet sort of hit, isn't it?
I'm a professional. I have years of experience and the finest equipment money can buy.
Yeah, but my mate Trevor, he has got some of them Waves plugins. He says he got them from a torrent, and that he has a multiband compressor preset that makes tracks mad fat.
Yes, but presets in.
Yeah, and he said he'll do 12 tracks for £12. Get me? Get me? You get me though? Get me?
I can't remember what it's called now. Have you seen that one? The mastering one.
Yeah,
This is fantastic, but it's very true. I mean, one, you pay the money because it costs a damn lot of money to set a good mastering studio up, basically. To buy the things like the lathes and the PMCs, the Prism stuff, it costs money, you know, and everyone, I understand, yet there is a big difference between someone charging £200 an hour and £10 an hour. But I think if you want quality, if you want experience, then you're going to have to move towards that sort of higher end. I'm sure there are guys out there that are doing it for £10, £20 a track that have got great ears. But I don't necessarily believe that I trust the rooms are spot on, or the acoustics are spot on, or that they're not just using plugins. And certain plugins are fine, and I think the most important thing with plugins is if you can hear what they're actually doing in a good sounding room, it's very important. I've played with some of the cheaper plugins, and on a small set of speakers you're not hearing all the artifacts that those plugins bring in, but when you hear it on the PMCs where everything's so open, you start actually analysing these plugins and you hear little artifacts that are left in there. The sound gets coloured. They're not great, you know.
And that actually brings me to another question I've wondered about for a while. Do you believe that the sort of mastering grade hearing can be learnt, or do you think it's part natural natural ability?
Both. I think in everything it's both. You know, I think you've got to have an ear for it to start with. I mean, obviously it's not, you know, you can't be deaf, you can't be half deaf, you can't have tinnitus, you can't have frequency issue problems. I think you certainly hone your ear over the year, and your brain. I think, you know, you do eventually tune into things slightly differently as a mastering engineer. You're more listening out for frequency issues, compression issues, you know, whether something's too dynamic. And I don't think you can necessarily just go straight cold into a room and know about those things. I think it's something you do pick up on over time. I think you can go into a room and balance a track straight away. I think you can, you know, mixing slightly different issue, but with mastering, because I think it's so frequency led, I do think that takes time. One, to learn all the frequencies, you know, obviously you can play a tone and I exactly tell you what frequency it is, but you roughly know. Yeah, so I do think it's something that you've got to first off have a natural ear to be able to do, but you do progress, you do learn, and you do tune your ear over the years. Definitely, yeah. Because
it's something, like I say, it's something I'm very interested in. I've been sort of actively reading and experimenting, and and I must be honest, I've flirted with other mastering engineers over the time, but nothing, to be honest, nothing stood up against the some of the work that you did.
Thank you.
It has been the best. So
it's like I said, it's the room. I think it's very much the room. I think, you know, there's a lot of very good engineers out there, but if you're working in a room or on a set of speakers that aren't true, then the end product isn't going to be true either. I think a very important thing in the mixing and mastering process is never master your track in the room where you've mixed it, because if there are any frequency problems in that room, you're not going to notice them when you come to do the mastering. So I think it's very important to step out of the environment where you've recorded and mixed a track, go somewhere with a fresh pair of ears in a tuned out room and really hear the final mix of your track, basically.
And so if someone is interested in getting you guys to do some work or trying out, where can they go to find out about
us?
Fluid?
Fluidmastering.com, basically. Yeah,
.com?
Quite simple, easy to remember website. Yeah, fluidmastering.com.
Okay. And do you think there's anything extra to be gained if you can attend?
Oh, very much so. We always recommend attending the session, because you obviously it's difficult for a band member or an engineer to come into a room that they've never heard before and expect them to be able to just go, yeah, I understand the speakers and I understand the setup. But if you can explain, if you can sit there and have a chat with them how you think the track, the final master should sound, like I said earlier, talk about any mix issues that they may have, you can, you know, when you're sitting there cold and there's no one here, you know how a finished master should sound, but you're always like, well, I could push it a bit more that way, or I could push it a bit more that way, and they both work. So quite often in unattended mastering, you perhaps work a bit more safe, basically. Whereas with the here, you can say, well, look, I can add a bit more of that, or I can control this area more. And it very much helps having the client in attendance, definitely.
Fantastic. All right.
It's just more fun as well, isn't it? You're not sitting there bloody chatting to yourself. You've got someone to talk to, and you got to get a rapport going with them. And especially if it's an engineer, you get a rapport going, and they like what you do, and they like the room, and then they'll come down more. It's it's not rocket science, that side of things, is it? It's
awesome. All right, well, I've actually bought a track down
I know,
that I'm hoping that you can
have a little play with.
Have a look
Must admit, it sounded pretty cool, so we'll just turn it up a few dB and leave it like that.
Excellent.
Go to the pub, shall we?
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, well, thanks for talking.
That's a pleasure, mate.
I guess we should get into it.
Pleasure, yeah, cool.